Oui.
Okay, thank you very much. Alors, avec ça dit, I will turn the floor over now to the Premier. Je vais donner pencher au Premier ministre maintenant.
Merci, Tyler. Good afternoon. Bonjour. After our update on Friday afternoon, I truly hope that our government and the CUPE leadership would be able to come to a resolution, but that has not happened. We presented an offer to the CUPE leadership last Thursday, the same offer that they said would be brought to all of the bargaining units, and the offer that we felt would conclude the negotiations. We want CUPE members and the New Brunswickers to have a chance to review what we feel is a fair and reasonable offer. Nous voulons que les membres de CFP et que les gens de New Brunswick aient la chance de voir ce que nous pensons d'être une offre équitable et raisonnable. That is why we released it publicly last Friday. C'est pourquoi nous l'avons dévoilé publiquement vendredi dernier. This offer is an average of 15% over 5 years, including wage adjustments. These annual increases are retroactive since many of the contracts have expired, so we're looking back in time. This offers an average of 15% over the 5 years, as I just said. Specific amounts will vary based on several different factors, but on average, each employee will receive $7,000 in retroactive pay. Sample salary increases and retroactive pay are online at www.gnb.ca/negotiations. Des exemples, l'augmentation de salaire et des payes rétroactifs sont disponibles pour les sites web du gouvernement. These increases are fair and reasonable and go above and beyond the rate of inflation when you're taking into account the past years. And the last 5 years, the inflation rate has averaged 2%. We are also offering to increase wages for casual employees from 80% to 100% of the applicable job rate at a cost of $8 million. We realize there have been some confusion and misinformation about pensions. Nous savons qu'il y a eu de la confusion et de la misinformation au sujet des pensions. In particular, I've heard a lot of misconceptions about a targeted benefit plan or shared risk plan. I've also heard comments at the MLAs, why don't they go on this plan? Well, I guess it's important to know that in the case of the shared risk plan, the MLAs have been on it since 2014. So yes, is a plan that works for everyone. But we've asked here, as part of the offer for CUPE, that we will sit down with the actuaries and the 2 school-based groups, who are the only groups that are involved here, because the other 5 groups are already on a targeted benefit plan that is sustainable and that does meet the future requirements and will be there for the employees. But we've asked that the actuaries will get together and they'll look at the plans in 1253 and 2745 and understand the condition the plans are in and create a path forward that is sustainable. Any path forward would see the plans get fully funded to start the process, because right now they are significantly underfunded. And while we can argue that, well, the taxpayers just should continue to fund it, whatever's required, it's not fair and reasonable for taxpayers who, at this point, 65% would not have a pension of any kind at all. We want to ensure that the part-time workers who do not work sufficient hours to qualify for the current plans have access also to a sustainable long-term pension plan. This will not have an impact on existing pension plans of the other 5 locals. In fact, they are not impacted at all in this particular evaluation, as their plans are certainly, as I said earlier, under a program that is sustainable. Cela n'aura pas d'incidence sur les régimes de pension actuels des 5 autres sections locales. Our goal is to ensure that employees in CUPE 2745 and CUPE 1253 have better access to sustainable long-term pension plans. And I want to be clear that the process that we have put forward in our offer is an independent one, where actuaries from either side will look at the reality. The same process that others have looked at over time and said, you know, pensions have changed. Pensions have changed because in order for them to be there, they have to be funded appropriately, and they have to be funded appropriately through the process. And what's changed in pensions over the years is that people are now retired longer than they were 30, 40 years ago. Sometimes twice as long, sometimes longer than they've actually worked. So the pension plans need to be adjusted in order to make sure that that is, it will be there for as long as people need them. And I also want to comment, because I've heard different discussions around that the government took holidays and didn't make payments, and that's why the pensions are underfunded. Well, you know, back in the 70s, that was the case. In late 70s, interest rates were high, pensions were funded, but they were on a formula that was not sustainable long-term, but it was high interest rates. So there were pension holidays taken back in the 70s, late 70s, 80s. But in the early 90s, there was an agreement made to put the funds to get them fully funded and back to a position where their liabilities would be fully taken care of. And that those extra payments would be made until the plans were fully funded. And that did happen in the 90s. And in fact, the plans were fully funded in 2002. And therefore, there wouldn't be a requirement for special payments. However, until 2012, when it was looked at, because they all continued to erode in their value. And that's when the changes were made. These pension plans that we're talking in these two groups, which are to get them funded properly, but more importantly, to have another 2,500 or 3,000 people be able to join the plan. That's what's exciting, that we would have more people access to pensions in a way that they haven't had to date. And I think it's just extremely important for everyone to realize that this is an independent process. The numbers will be what the numbers will be. The actuaries will evaluate for the pension holders, and we'll have a good path forward based on real information. Je veux être clair, c'est un processus indépendant. We as a government will not be making decisions on the future of pensions in this group. It will be an actuary, a trained professional who estimates the financial impact of uncertainty and helps clients minimize risk. As part of this discussion, the following conditions would need to be met. The revise the pension plan's eligibility criteria to improve access for part-time workers. The pension plan must be sustainable, affordable, and secure for plan members and the government. Contribution rates must be fair and equitable for plan members and the government. And the government would continue to make payments and not be allowed to suspend payments for any reason, because it would be an obligation to do so under a new plan. We know that CUPE members feel that they're caught in the middle, because 5 of the 10 unions are not involved in this discussion. Nous savons que les membres de SCFP se sentent pris entre les deux. That is why it's so important for us that they see the government offer and that they have the opportunity to review it with their local. You know, it seems like what we have here is a situation that we have a union of the unions. So we have an offer that is easily acceptable by 5 of the 7 unions. And it would be very acceptable to the other 2 when they understand the full extent of what's being proposed here. So it's a difficult position for a government to be in. It's a difficult position for members to be in. So I encourage the members to read the offer. I really want everyone to understand what is being proposed here. This is a really good deal for employees. Je vous demande sincèrement, si vous êtes un membre de SCFP, lisez notre offre par vous-même. I hope that after seeing the offer that we have made, our government and CUPE will be able to reach a solution that works for employees and New Brunswickers. However, I believe that solution will only be reached when the members have a full understanding and that they vote on the offer. And to that point, I've suggested that we would do that in a way that we basically would, Mr. Drost and I would sign a letter to clearly indicate that we were voting on what we both had agreed, so there wouldn't be any confusion what was being voted on. And that also the situation would be that everyone would have the opportunity to understand. I've agreed to participate in town halls, any sort of Q&A, have financial folks involved and to look at this. But it's important for us to ensure that every member realize what a good offer this is. We've tried to balance between taxpayers and employees, and it's not always easy. And it's very difficult in this case. However, when the offer is assessed on its true merit, I believe it is one that is more than acceptable. And I believe that this is not a national issue, which I believe it's become. CUPE National have made no secret that they are pushing hard back. And I believe it is driven entirely from a national perspective. It's time that our local leaders decided what they have on the table and that it is more than fair for both employees and taxpayers. And we need to address it in its entirety as a package, as the offer we put forward last week. This is not a time for any further discussion. It's a time for a vote and an assessment. It's a time for further clarification because everyone needs to understand exactly what's being proposed. And that's why I feel confident about it, because it's important that once you know, you'll say, wow, this works better for our employees. It also provides something they cannot have access today, and that is a pension plan who many, we're talking 2,000, maybe even as high as 3,000 that aren't able or to participate in a plan like we're proposing could come out of this after evaluation. But I won't presuppose what that could look like because it'll be an independent financial review. But what I do know is the current plans in these two locals are not sustainable under their current formula. Thank you. Merci.
Recording in progress.
Merci. We'll now proceed with questions from the media. Nous allons maintenant procéder aux questions des journalistes. Each reporter will have one question and one follow-up. You're invited to ask your question in the official language of your choice. Chaque journaliste aura une question à un suivi et vous êtes invité à poser vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we have an interpreter available for this meeting. Please click the interpretation button at the bottom of the screen to choose English or French. You can also listen to the original feed. De plus, nous avons une interprète disponible pour cette réunion. Veuillez cliquer sur le bouton d'interprétation au bas de l'écran pour choisir l'anglais ou le français. Vous pouvez également écouter la transmission originale. Thank you. Merci. With that said, we'll go to the first question from Laura Brown, CTV.
Hi, Premier. I'm wondering, you had mentioned town halls or Q&As. Are you going to schedule one? I think you would have the power to do that. I guess, are you prepared to do that?
I'm absolutely prepared to do it. We have been putting out, as you know, a lot of information in relation to clarifying questions that we're seeing that are coming from social media. We're seeing a Q&A we're putting out in that regard. There's also, looking at an access line that would be set up so members could, employees could call in and ask questions. So a combination, I think, in relation to an online possible town hall that anyone could call in and ask questions and we would be able to answer or certainly get those answers. So we haven't got a schedule just yet, but I'm certainly willing and able to participate.
And at this point, I'm just wondering if you have been speaking at all to Mr. Drost over the weekend, or if there's any future plans on the books, scheduled meetings, telephone calls, text messages, etc., that have been done with CUPE.
No, I haven't. We haven't had any further discussion since I guess our rather public meeting last Friday. We do not have a need to go back to the table here. We have an offer. Our offer that we presented last week, it was in its final form. We made that clear that was our offer when they left the building last Thursday night, I believe it was. And the process here needs to be the members understand what it is that's on the table and that it is indeed clarified. So, because that's what I learned on Friday from speaking to many, is that further clarification was needed and we need to ensure all the facts are on the table. So I think that it's important that that is the next step and a vote for the membership, because that's what we need to see now.
Thank you. Sarah Derry, Radio-Canada Acadie.
Oui, on voit que sur les salaires, le syndicat dit être d'accord avec votre offre. Ça bloque vraiment par rapport aux pensions. Pourquoi tenter de garder les pensions dans la convention? Pourquoi pas le passer à l'extérieur des conventions comme ça a déjà été fait par le passé?
These pensions are in fact a negotiated pension for both of these groups. So it is very much part of a discussion through negotiations. And what we're proposing here is actually to not suggest, one form or another of the pension, but basically suggest that the actuaries look at it and determine the condition the pensions are in and how we can ensure that it becomes sustainable pensions going forward. So this is very much part of the negotiation with these two groups. The other five, it does not involve them at all. In the sense of this is a side issue, and we've said, we can settle with the other five. But what's interesting when I refer to the union of the unions is that it's like we can't settle with the other five, even though this is not their issue, because we have to deal with these two on this issue. And we've said to deal with these two, we'll do it on an independent process. So, we have a very good proposal here, and we are balancing between protecting the rights of the taxpayers and the employees. And, so many people have looked at pensions over the last number of years and recognized there's a need to fix many of these, as well as provide the opportunity for so many more, in this case, thousands, to get into a plan of some sort. That is the opportunity that's in front of us. Kind of amazing, really, when the union would resist the opportunity for another 2,000 or 3,000 of their employees to have access to a pension. Quite unique, I would guess, situation.
Et c'est ça, le syndicat dit qu'il ne pliera pas sur la question là, parce que, bon, voilà, il y a une partie aussi de la section 1253 qui a déjà un plan, en fait, et qui ne veulent pas aller vers des régimes à risque partagé. Est-ce que vous ne plierez pas non plus? Est-ce qu'on peut s'attendre à ce que le conflit continue pendant plusieurs jours? Il y a les membres d'Alcool Nouveau-Brunswick aussi qui pourraient se joindre.
Well, if that's their position, that they're not prepared to look at the sustainability of the current plans, they're putting those plans at risk. So yes, we're likely in for a long haul here and we could have 5 other unions back to work. It's interesting that we would like to get schools back in. We would like to get people back to work. And it's interesting when you look across the sector that probably 80%, 85% of all government employees are on a different pension plan. Now, what I'm suggesting here is that this is different. I'm not suggesting a plan of a defined nature. I'm suggesting an evaluation process to determine what type of plan should be put in place to make these sustainable and provide greater access. And so this is kind of an interesting situation of why the union would take this position, because it's, so I am saying clearly, this is a national issue. This comes down to an individual issue. And unfortunately, the employees of the government and some 20,000 employees are being used in this process to reflect national interests. And I just find that so unfortunate, because our employees deserve better.
Thank you.
Thank you, merci. Andrew Watt, Brunswick News.
Thanks, Tyler. Premier, you're talking about the difficulty of, just these two locals and their pensions. Didn't the province, effectively you, agree to negotiate with all these different locals as a group? And
we agreed to negotiate a wage package as a group, and then we identified the other items that were on the table, of which pensions was one of them. So what we agreed to negotiate as a group was the wage package, and we've done that, and we've landed on a wage package. So one would have to argue if 5 of the 7 groups have no other issues, then the only rationale for not allowing those groups to settle would be to create this union of the unions and a more powerful force against the taxpayers and against government.
But if you agreed to just negotiate wages, why'd you bring pensions into it?
No, what I said, Andrew, is we agreed that we would negotiate wages with all unions, but the other issues we negotiate directly with the locals that were involved. That's what we agreed to. We just agreed that the wage package could be negotiated as a group. And then the individual items would be negotiated with the locals prior to settlement. That's what we agreed to.
So, sorry, I know I've only got two questions, but I just want to clarify this issue. So what you're saying right now is these other 5 unions, you know, potentially should be allowed to just break off and vote on wages alone and go back to work. And then you can just separately sort it out with these other 2. Is that correct?
Well, yes, Sandra, I am saying that, but I don't know that it's, you know, they're actually breaking off. I mean, they are union and they're locals in their own right. And they should be protecting the, you know, the leaders protect the interests of their local. And so when you have a consolidation like this of several locals tied together, and 5 of which do not have any issue here that is connected to them, but they knew from the beginning that the only 2 that did have related to the pensions were these other 2 locals. So why would they not settle? Because we did finalize the wage settlement, and I would say it's finalized. That's where that stands. But they all knew from the very beginning, even though they refused to talk about it from the very beginning, that it was on the table.
Thank you.
Daniel Edwards, Canadian Press. I'm sorry, I meant to say Giuseppe Valiante.
Yes, thank you very much. So my first question is just a clarification question here, Premier. So 5 of the 7 locals have what's known as a shared risk model for their pensions. 2 do not. The 2 that do not are underfunded. And yes, so the 2 that do not are underfunded, and therefore you want to have actuaries take a look at what can be done for that. And I just want to know, with regards to that, would the decision from the actuaries regarding the future of those pensions be a final decision, and the members would have to accept what the actuaries say?
We actually laid that out in our offer about the parties agreeing to work with 2 independent actuaries to evaluate. And then there was a third party, almost like I don't know, what do you call it, an arbitration process that would determine the next step. And so as we laid that out in our offer, I think, which is online now, it followed a process there, but one that was not dictated by government.
Okay. And my second question is about the comment that you just made, the idea that, you know, yes, we're likely in for a long haul here if the union keeps its position on the pensions. What do you mean by long haul here? Can you just describe how long the government's willing to wait? How long the government's willing to have all these members on strike? What's the future here?
Well, I mean, I guess it's unfortunate that we're in this position, but I mean, what is being asked here, as I said, a good portion, the majority could go back to work. But we're asking for a review of something that would only, you know, if you use a rational approach to this, say, well, why wouldn't you review this? And why wouldn't you want the opportunity for others to join this plan? And all the people that are, let's say, are waiting to go back to work, or are currently, in the case of schools and such, when you say, you know, to get schools back into service, they already are part of a sustainable pension plan. So while I'm not defining what the plan can look like, what we do know is right today, it does not have a funding formula that is sustainable. And we do know that there is a process through an actuarial review, and we've seen it happening around us. I think that, you know, when we say this is a good thing for members, it is a case of just clarification and interpretation of understanding what would happen. Your pensions will be safe, and making sure everyone has a good information flow here that's accurate. I think there's been a lot of information that is spread that is not accurate, and I would like to set the record straight in that regard. And for me, it would be based on actuarial analysis is the best way to do that.
Thank you. Vicky Hogarth, CHCO TV.
Thanks, Tyler. Premier Higgs, are you able to sign a wage package separately and then just deal with the 2 locals that have issues with pension on their own so that people can get back to work?
Yes, we are. And the original intent would have been to finalize a wage package, which I feel that we have done. Wage package that is certainly very reflective of the concerns that were raised and dealt with. And yes, and we could deal with these two locals in relation to a process under which the pensions would be analyzed. And in fact, what we have proposed, if it's agreed to, then we could put everybody back to work. And this proposal would then start down the road to evaluation. So we wouldn't have to wait for the evaluation to be completed before we got everyone back to work. It would just be a case of an agreement to put it in place.
And just as a follow-up, are you able to provide us with any more details about these independent actuaries involved with pension negotiations? How long have they been involved, and should we expect to see a review from them?
Well, the process could be vary, but we've had like every few years there's analysis done on the condition of pensions. So there any pension to see what is the state of their funded liabilities. And that's been done on a regular basis for these plans, and they certainly have a shortfall that runs anywhere from 7 to 10 million a year. The issue, this is something that's been looked at in other jurisdictions. It's something we looked at over the last 8 to 10 years. So, it's a process that we defined in our offer that would take likely at least 6 months. It could take longer, and we made that condition in our offer too, that if it carried on, we would mutually agree on a timeline there to carry it on. So we're only asking that we agree to a process to have experts tell us what is the condition of these pensions. How do we get more people into a pension program? And how do we do so it's fair to taxpayers and fair to the employees? And in the process, that individuals who are involved in a pension now in those locals, their accrued benefits will be recognized, and the pension will be fully funded as it starts down the road of a new formula. So, this is a really good news story. And I really feel that this is a case, as I have made and referenced several times, of a national interest overriding a provincial issue.
Thank you. Natalie Sturgeon, Global.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Premier, I'm just going to get you to clarify. So for those two locals, they would have to agree to enter a shared risk pension plan, and the actuaries would come in and assess those pensions after, or could you just clarify?
No. Yes, I can. And no, they would not have to agree to enter a shared risk plan at all. It's basically what we're asking. The parties would agree and mandate their respective actuaries to transition and negotiate in good faith the specific terms and conditions of a new retirement vehicle. I don't know what that looks like. And the timeline given, and the idea, and it had to fit a whole list of terms that started with all employees who are members of the union shall have participation rights. It'll be sustainable, affordable, and secure for the province and the plan members. So it has a number of conditions that are laid out in our proposal, but there is no request to all of a sudden accept a shared risk model at all. It's a request to agree to the process to determine a model that would indeed ensure the pensions are safe and secure and they're fundable. And it's not fundable based totally on taxpayers just continuing to put into a model that is proven to have outlived its reliability. And the basics of that, Natalie, are basically people now live longer and are retired longer than the pension formula was ever designed for. We have people retired for longer than they even have worked in many cases. So that's why the pensions are not fundable. There's not enough money put into them to fund a term that could indeed be as long or almost as long as you worked.
Premier, how long can this go on realistically, this strike?
Well, it should end tomorrow. It should end today. And we should see, everybody come back to work and a process here to determine how the pensions actually can be sustainable and how we can get another 3,000 people into a pension plan who currently don't qualify. It's kind of hard to imagine in some ways, how this is not a good news item. And people don't see this as and I believe that's why the communication side is so important, that our employees would certainly see the benefits here and that we could get back to normal here soon. That would be my goal. But it is something that is in the CUPE's hands right now, but I would say more notably in the hands of our employees, that I am very, I guess, confident and hopeful that when they understand all the details, they will see that this is a good path forward.
Thank you, Premier. Natalie, Simon Delattre, Acadie Nouvelle.
Non, pas de questions supplémentaires, merci.
Merci, Simon. Tamara Steele, CHSJ News. Okay, Hadil Ibrahim, CBC.
Thank you. Premier, you've raised concerns about the financial mess the two CUPE school board pensions are in. And you just now said underfunding was an issue in the 90s, but a labor arbitration decision issued in June suggests the mess was caused by the province underfunding the plans after the 2008 financial collapse, and it accumulated somewhat before government stopped making the payments in 2013. So the question is, are you trying to change these pension plans to escape paying for years of government not properly funding them?
Absolutely not. And any actuary would determine where any shortfalls were made and would define if it's a government responsibility to make up that, then the government would certainly have to do that. So that is the purpose of an actuarial review, and having that done independently, and having CUPE as well as government have their own actuaries, so that all of the details would come to the table. So I am absolutely not trying to move away from any responsibilities from government whatsoever. I just want the analysis to be done fairly, and we really have a path forward that is a sustainable future. But government should, we can all have our different views on whether it was funded properly or not, but I'm not an actuary. And so that would determine that.
Okay, thank you. And if you're trying to determine, you said you're trying to determine what the best pension is. Why is it that the memorandum of agreement says pension representatives or the actuaries will have to find a new retirement vehicle that's effectively taking out the current pensions off the table? Isn't that forcing the union to say goodbye to the pension plans they think is best? And what possible alternative to shared risk could the actuaries find?
Well, there are many different types of benefit, retirement benefit programs. But I think that the point you made about what they think is best, or CUPE thinks is best, you could put that in the same category as what I think is best. But it's not for me to decide. There are standard actuarial practices that are in place to ensure that when people retire, they have a safe, sustainable, and available pension plan.
Sorry to interrupt, Premier, but when you say a new retirement vehicle, doesn't that take off the table already one option?
Well, the retirement vehicle that's currently there requires 7 to 10 million in addition to the regular payments made for employer and employee contributions. It requires 7 to 10 million, depending on the performance of the plan, in order to keep it functional. So any pension plan would not normally need that. I can appreciate that it would in different times, and I went through the issues around how the formula was based originally versus now. But the idea on a pension plan, like you mentioned, 2008, but if you look over this last 3 years, the pensions have performed very well, and they've been very secure. And if you look over the last number of years and what's been paid out under a different plan, it's worked very well. So I think the point is this: I am not determining what it should look like. But what I do know, and what I guess the actuaries would validate in one form or another through their analysis, is, are the current plans sustainable? Why would we have to continue to put money year over year over year, over and above normal contributions, in order for the plan to survive? And that's all we're asking for here, is the analysis. So to suggest it's the same formula, And yet we continue to require taxpayers continue to fund with additional money every year. And I'm talking money over and above normal contributions here. So that is the issue. And I'm not the one to determine the actual numbers, but the process would determine. And a new vehicle, we're saying is that's what we propose, but we don't know what the new vehicle looks like. And it could be very similar to what exists today in some format. But if the actuaries determine there's an issue, let's not be afraid to address it. That's all we're asking.
Thank you. And final question final questions rather, from your question, Vanessa Ballantyne, CBC.
Thanks. Premier, many people from locals who are legislated back to work say they're upset and frustrated with the move. But now that you have some has been so far, do you think legislating workers in healthcare back to work will delay the end of the strike even more than if the province didn't use the emergency order?
Well, firstly, the emergency order was used for a reason of health and safety for the citizens. We had a situation in our hospitals during a pandemic when we were not able to keep up with regular care needs. And I guess one might say it's a bad time to have a strike situation, but it's really bad to suggest that, or any time it's a bad time to have a strike situation, but it's really bad to do it in a case of a health crisis and a pandemic. So given that was the rationale that we needed people back to work in order to maintain our healthcare system. And so it's a different decision. I got to say, I've been, from the messaging I'm getting from the two health authorities, I've been so impressed with the people that have come back to work and have done so and integrated right back into the workforce as we thought they would or hoped they would, because they are our friends and neighbors. And we need to just kind of pick up where we left off and make this work. So they have come back with an attitude of really let's help New Brunswick citizens be safe and healthy. And that's why it was done, and they are certainly living up to that. And that's why the offer is what it is too. We've gone through a pandemic. This offer reflects, what people have done through this pandemic. And I guess when you look at an offer that amounts to 15% over 5 years and a high retroactivity, because a lot of the contracts have expired way back, some 4 to 5 years. It's a good offer. It should be seen as that, because it really is.
And just as a follow-up, CUPE has stated it is prepared to go to court over the Emergency Act forcing healthcare workers back to work since the Labor Board dismissed its emergency complaint. How is the province preparing to defend the move legally? And that includes how much the province is willing to spend on that.
Well, through the pandemic, we spent what was necessary to keep the health and safety of our citizens first and foremost. And our hospitals have performed very well. Our healthcare workers have performed very well. Throughout the entire pandemic, we came closest during this fourth wave to reaching, the higher levels. At, I think 67 was our maximum in our hospitals. So we will continue to defend the health and safety of our citizens. And it's just unfortunate that CUPE would continue to challenge us in court when we have an Emergency Measures Act in place, when we have a pandemic on the fourth wave, and we have situations in our hospitals that need to be addressed, and we were canceling, elective surgeries and starting to get to a point where it could go beyond that. It's kind of hard to imagine that the CUPE leadership would take a position that they are, but I assure you, we will defend it fully in the courts.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Vanessa. Merci tout le monde. Ça, c'est conclu notre conférence de presse aujourd'hui. That concludes today's press conference. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you.
Thanks, Premier.
Recording stopped.